Hi, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about the third in our series called NESARA Explained. We're going to deal with price versus value through NESARA. Coming right up. Okay, so as we talk about price versus value, we have to go backward in time. So the very first video, if you haven't watched it, you got to watch it. Sorry, you have to watch it to get you caught up. It tells you about the cognitive dissonance. I mean, do you know that, like, just the other day, this is in April of 2022, and you know, idiot Biden's walking across the lawn at Easter time frame, and there's another guy in the background, and his leg is missing in the side of the grass. And you go, how could that happen? It's because it's CGI. That cognitive dissonance is something to tell you, wait, what are you really looking at? Okay? Secondarily, on the second video, we talked about debt. And we talked about how debt is spiraling out of control. Say that one 3 times in a row. Obviously, I couldn't there. Here's the point. People are asking this question, is NESARA real? Because Jordan Sather or this guy or that guy is trying to tell you that it's not. They can't see it. It's been around for the Fed has been around for 107 years. They've never lived with anything else. They hear the evidences of the child trafficking or the election blank, all these other crazy, stupid things, and they hear about it all the time. But they've never really investigated NESARA, because when they see it, they go, it can't happen. Here's the reality. We were going through one or the other, and we'll show you more about that as we go along here. We were either going to go through the Great Reset, which is another type of bankruptcy done by the World Economic Forum, by the cabal, by the idiots of Klaus Schwab and Hillary and Biden and all of the morons, okay? They wanted the system to happen. And that's the only thing you have heard. And so when you listen to this, you think it's just poppycock, okay? But the reality is, if we go that way, America goes down in flames and we will be a communist nation. And people go, right, that's what it is. Well, you should be out with your guns if that was the case. And the reality is the military's been going, hey, listen, we got this, we got this. Why do they got this? It's because NESARA is the center of the issue. You have to flip the money over. Everything is going rocketing up. And we'll talk as we go along so you see that from the fiat currency out to the gold standard that's coming, actually is in place. And again, this is April 20th of 2022. So we'll talk through that kind of issue. And that will help you to see it. Now, the first slide over here that you're going to see is John Piper talking. Now, John Piper's talking about the dangers of money. Now, I wish I could show you the whole thing with YouTube situations. I totally get it. But here's what I want you to see. What Piper is telling you is that wealth for people, he first starts and says almost usually. And then he says, well, you know, basically 95% of the situation. So he's like almost usually or usually, and then he kind of goes, well, almost always. So it goes from maybe, 70% to like a 95% within about a 3-second time frame. He basically says that it's always going to get you into buying things. Okay? So what he's propagating is this idea that the poor are good people, okay, when it comes to money. The middle class are generous. And this is an undercurrent statement. You got to ask the questions about why are they saying it the way they say things, okay? And then lastly, that the rich are beholden to money. Their whole process is about money. everything that they do. And it is a danger kind of zone. So if you suddenly move from this up to here, you would say, well, you're definitely going to have this problem. Now, why is he saying that? Now, normally when he gets into this kind of realm, we're talking about a lottery winning, someone who's never prepared in that situation from being from here to here. Now, and then he moves on is that I think it's the Timothy statement that money is, people want to do this, money is the root of all evil. No, money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, this one lady wanted to, like, well, does it say that? I was like, yes, it does say that, and it says it in the Greek. And we can prove it over and over again. But we're talking about the love of money. He's basically indicating that there's no way to be generous with money if you're wealthy. I think you kind of get this from the surface going, that is a fallacy. And yet, we propagated this through all the religion kind of points. Okay? Specifically, the Catholics have brought in the monk and the nun kind of response, and the papacy, that they're all like supposed to be poor. I want to say it's John Michael Murphy, I hope that is, but it's a guy in the 80s, and he was a really fun guitarist. He was, just a gorgeous guitar, acoustic guitar, and he would sing, and he used to talk, and he was a monk, and he used to talk that he only had his 2 guitars to his name, and I always found that kind of funny. And I thought, well, that's pious. Do you see? Poor is pious. This is the response that people like this go for it. And you have to see that's not true. It is never true. There are plenty of people who are wealthy who don't just think about money. But you know what the reality is? Many of the poor think about money a lot. Actually, both money people come up with it. Rich and the poor talk about money more than anyone else. And middle class isn't necessarily generous. Money isn't the point of this whole point, this issue. And yet most people feel like it is, okay? So, go on to the next slide here. And I want to kind of walk this through as we see this on the screen. Okay. Now, on the left side, we're talking about the gold-backed currency is inelastic, meaning that it can't be printed, but it has to be set up in the banks. So here's what happens. In other circumstances, when you have money, when you have a fiat currency, the fiat currency lets you just move the money flow up and down depending upon the need of the economy. And you think, well, that's a good thing. If we have a need of money, we would have to get it. But every time you turn up the money flow and turn down the money flow, you're devaluing or revaluing out the cash. And normally, you're creating an upflow, which increases inflation, which means that your money is worthless more and more. Now, when we move into that gold-backed currency, it deletes this whole process, and it becomes more inelastic. Easy for me to spell there. Okay, so it's inelastic, which means you're not going to turn up and down the money because the gold has an equal equation to, it's called the U.S. Treasury note, or USTN, okay? So you might even see a slightly new symbol. At first, you're probably going to see the exact same symbol. But I think after time, you might see a slightly different symbol. Now, here's what happens. At this moment in time, Russia has actually done this. By the way, you don't understand that almost all the nations out in the Pacific region, or in the Pacific area, like China and Japan, have actually revalued into precious metals. And right this very second, there's 5,200 rubles equals 1 ounce of gold. That's their revalue point. Now, does it stay that way? Maybe not, but that's how they set that kind of thing. So they're saying you have to pay for the oil situations. For oil, you cannot use the American dollar. You only have to use the ruble to pay for that. Boy, that is some cool stuff. You might be scared about it. It's because the media tells you to be scared about it. The reality is it's an awesome thing, okay? The banks then can't take their money in and fractionalize it. See, here's what happens to the banks. They take money in, they take it in, and then they loan it out to different places as it goes along. And we start to see this process, and every time they loan it out, they've added more money into the system. See, they just got in a certain amount of money, but then they loan it out and they've made more money. So it's called fractionalizing, okay? And see, inside of that, they created compound interest, so the money coming back to them is a big percentage of extra money, right? So even if they have a loan at a 6-year loan at 5%, just for a car, let's just say, that thing comes back into them with that extra money. So it increases the monetary flow. But every time it increases the monetary flow, people always get excited about the monetary flow. That's not what you should be excited about. You should actually be upset about that because they change more money in and out. This is the system, and it devalues your currency with that. So it will not be that endless stream. They have to have what's on hand and make sure that that product, which is the money, goes out in the right kind of pattern. Listen, I'm a business owner. If a person walks into me, and I've had this happen numerous times, they come in and they want to get help with their hearing. So we talk to them and say, well, how do we want to pay for it? Well, I don't know. Like, wait a second, you just don't walk onto a place and tell them, well, I want that, but I don't have any money to pay for it. See, business owners don't work that way. They go, you got to pay for it. You don't get to walk out of here. That's called stealing. Do you catch that point? When you walk out of there without actually paying for it, it is stealing. That's what the banks all do. But that's part of the Fed system in the compound interest. And some of you might be upset about it, but that's what's happening. And I think that because we see that response, they're going to change everything. Here's what's going to mess your brain up here. I want you to see this. When we talk about the response of money, let's just say you have 760 credit when we look at debt to income. Now let me explain how debt is seen. Debt is always a backward glance at what you had purchased in the past for that product, okay? And we're not talking about bills like your electricity. Electricity is a now, basically a now function. Of course, it was last month, but essentially it is a now function. It is not a part of debt. Debt is something that you bought, like a house, a car, a credit card, you have monies upon that. Now, some people, lots of people, I do this a lot. I'll put money on the credit card and pay it off at the end of the month. Put money on the credit card and pay it off at the end of the month. Just how I've worked. And it actually, I use the system against itself, okay? But when we're talking about debt to income, we want to have the ratios less than 30%, because if we start pushing on 30%, that person is closer to bankruptcy than anything else. So when someone is at 760, maybe their debt ratio is 12%, and I'm making up numbers. Just listen to me here. Here's what's going to be weird. If and when, actually when, don't catch me wrong on that one. When we see the debt wiped out, and it will be wiped out, how do you calculate debt to income ratios with the credit system? The answer is you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to throw the whole system out of that. Now that might stress people out, but guess what? You got to do it. So here's what I believe we're going to start seeing is banks actually operating in a new kind of pattern. And it's going to be kind of strange. And I'm not talking about maybe rotating kind of credits that are more minor amounts, but it might happen that way pretty soon too. But if you're going to buy a house, The bank may come in and look at your budget. Why would they look at your budget? They're not just trying, I mean, by the way, they already get inside of your credit. When you do a credit report and a personal financial agreement, you're actually showing them your budget, okay? They can actually see that stuff, okay? So, when you look at the person's budget, you're talking about the ability to pay. Now, as a business owner, I deal with this every day. Even a big business or a small business looks at the ability for the person to pay. So how come banks don't help you with that? If they're the money people, why don't the banks help you with understanding your ability to pay? Because they don't want to educate you. But in the NESARA gold-backed currency point, you're going to have to do that. It is probably going to be one of the major topics that are coming out here. So the credit system for this will be based upon what your budget is. Gosh, my iWatch just wants to go off here. Okay, so you're going to see that kind of system probably change in that kind of pattern. Now, when we have this idea, the fourth one down on the screen on the left side, is can lead to bank runs. And if we have uncertainty and speculation, you don't understand, but if you go back, there is a YouTube channel called Truth Stream Media. Truth Stream is one word, excuse me. Truth Stream Media. Go on the YouTube channel, Truth Stream Media. In Truth Stream Media, they actually have this, it's called a shell game, and it's a whole process in this, like 10 parts or something or other. And it does a gorgeous response of how to explain what's happened in the past, how currency and how banking has changed, and how the corruption is inside of that. It's very helpful to watch through that kind of video series. But you'll see times of bank runs. And most of the bank runs, if not all of the bank runs, are fallacies. That means the banks just created it to get you to come back for it, and they're trying to close out that little tiny bank. See, sometimes they had too many banks out there in their viewpoint and the central banking idea, so they had to close the small banks so that people would lose all their money and go, you need to come to us, not to them. That's the sickness of our system, and we need to have that kind of calm down. Now, when we move over, and I just want you to understand how the fiat currency is. The fiat currency is built by the Fed. And you go, okay, and I say this comment here, it's illegal due to the Constitution. Inside the Constitution, it stipulates that you have to pay your debts, as we were talking about before here, you have to pay your debt with gold or silver. And here's the thing, when you look at a dollar bill and you see it, it says legal tender, basically backed by the Fed, okay? And the Fed is the backing. So wait a second, but we know that you can move in and out monies of the system, which is inflation, deflation. And when you do that, it's a debt system because it's a rotating amount. So you're paying debt not with gold and silver. You're paying debt with debt. And if you watched my video before, it is listed in state laws, including in Washington state. I'm sure it's in other states. But you can't pay a debt with a credit card kind of thing. But they're allowed at times to do this. But the fiat currency is a debt, paying your debts. It's built on this scarcity model. If you go backwards to John Piper, a lot of people have to retrain their brain. They got to flush the crap in there and come out and realize that they feel like there's only a certain amount of gold and you can only make a certain amount of money and you got to live on your viewpoint. Go watch movies. Go watch TV series. And they show people in their normal households, in the small, decrepit households, and you go, they don't show a potential opulence. But on the other side of it, you walk in to places like Zelensky up in Ukraine, who's And people want to talk about, let's support Ukraine. I'm like, shut up. Do you know that Zelensky makes $11 million a year, has 15 separate houses? He's got $1 billion in assets. How does he have that? Because he's stealing from the people. This is what they want you to perceive. And when you walk into some of these castles, they got gold columns. Wait, now we have to take the gold and put it in a column? Okay? They've illegally structured it because currency has to come through Congress. This is a stipulation of the Constitution, and the Treasury is the vehicle of Congress. This is a constitutional point. This is why I'm going to tell you, and you're going to get really mad at me, some of you, is that crypto is not a currency. People say cryptocurrency. And I'm like, no, it's not a currency. It's a data packet. It's like if now I'm sitting over here looking at my iPad. And what I did is I took a PowerPoint that I normally put on my screen over here. And I have a PowerPoint, and I wanted to upload it into the system for my video production company. Okay, so I have a video production company that puts it all together. And then you're seeing it on the side of the screen here. Okay, so what I do is I take that PowerPoint and change it to a PDF. Okay, so, but here's what happens. You know, you can use cryptos, and what it is it's taking a data packet from one place to another, and it changes that, sometimes it changes the form. That's what happens when you send money from New York City to Paris. Through crypto, you're changing the form because Paris is under the euro. Do you catch that point? Or the lira, however, whatever they're doing now. So you're talking about this is what cryptocurrency is trying to say. But here's the problem with cryptos. The problem with, they're not bad in the fiat currency, not at all. They're wonderful in the fiat currency. But they're only a data packet encryption point. So what we're saying, and they're using blockchain, and by the way, under the NESARA conversation, the gold chain, quantum financial system is blockchained. It is going to be total private information. The banks won't have any ability to do it unless you're logged into them and you allow them into the system. But in the fiat system, here's what we have to congressionally have the currency under the Congress, which means you also have to do a 2-term limit to these idiots. You can't let them be in Congress for 47 years. It's not going to happen. Okay? That's part of NESARA too. All of these suckers have an end to their debt structure. I want you to think about this. So there is a psychiatric hospital in Tulsa, and I don't want to give the name, but when they started up, they had a gorgeous set of principles. But they were working on this kind of budget in the first 5 years. And my wife used to work there. And she was always questioning when she started to get into the budget constraints when she became, the interim director of nursing, which she didn't want to be. And she was like, why are we going off of this budget? Because this was a trust. This is what our real budget is. Now, when you start up a hospital or a company or something like that, you normally have seed money type of trust, okay? So you have seed money that you're only going to have for a short period of time. It's trying to get you over the hump when your expenses are probably outweighing your sales, okay, or your income points. So your income versus your expenses are your balance, or your profit and loss, okay? But what they were doing is living off of this when this is what their real ability to make money was. After 5 years, guess what happened? They dropped their budget because they were living inside this budget instead of this budget. Oh, that's a way to kill yourself. And that's what happened. In the 5th or the 6th year, they turned around and shut off a whole bunch of people, threw out a whole bunch of programs because they couldn't afford it anymore. This is what happens when you think you're living on borrowed time, but you're not really paying attention to it. This is why CFOs and all these other idiots are doing this every day. And inside of the debt model, we're seeing a point that about every 20 to 30 years, it actually changes. And you go through a bankruptcy. See, if you're living on debt, you're going to have a bankruptcy. And some of you are struggling right now because you're living on that debt structure point, and there will come an end. So as we talk about that end, let me give you an idea that happens. And we sort of talked about this in the original time frame. So this whole system started in 1913, and around 29 to 33 was the first debt crisis. Now, you know that in 1929, we had the stock market crash. But that really wasn't the exact beginning of this. It was the start, okay? I know I just said opposite. It was sort of the beginning, but not exact, okay? But it always is a few years time span when they start the bankruptcy point, okay? But most people didn't understand it. But what really occurred in 33 is we went off the gold standard. And when we went off the gold standard, now let me explain how that actually worked, and we talked about this originally. What they did is took the gold away from the people. So they had no control over the gold. Now, I'll pull up a different pen here. From 33 to 71 to around 74, gold had moved from in 33 to 34, it went up from 20 bucks up to $33 a share, or an ounce, excuse me. And it stayed relatively equal up around till 71. Now here's one of the things that happened. So when we look at this next slide here, we first see the stock market crash. So this guy sitting there, $100 will buy this car, must have the cash, lost all of it in the stock market. And it's the panic, okay? But again, it was a signal, okay? It was how they were stealing from you here in 29. And our next slide here, you're seeing a Texaco thing. So you see the Texaco with all the people driving up there, and they were stuck. So this part is into the next phase of how they take the money from us. So this is really where most people will say, well, this is where we went off the gold standard. And what that meant is that the American dollar was called the petrodollar. So it was based upon the oil that was transforming throughout the world, or moving throughout the world, just like a crypto, okay? A crypto is moving money throughout the world. So what Nixon was told to do, and I mean, there's some crazy things about Nixon. I'll give it to you in a second. But Nixon was told to do is he had to cut off the gold standard, because African, like South Africa or Egypt was turning in their dollars for gold. Well, guess what? We were coming to a bankruptcy point. And when we come to that bankruptcy point, gold went up to around 70 bucks. And by 1990, about 95, we were up at $368 per ounce. I mean, it just went off the charts with that. But let me give you a little Nixon point. Do you know that Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, JFK Sr.'s father, was deep into the cabal. He actually was close with Poppy Bush's dad, who's, pre-World War II era. Okay, Poppy Bush, Bush Sr. Fought in World War II. Okay, and Poppy Bush is one of the sickos with this. And Nixon actually fought and went to World War II. So did JFK. So he was a very young officer. But guess who brought him in? It's Joseph P. Kennedy. He was an actor, and he was brought in on the Republican side to go against JFK. Do you see how they always mess with elections? They've been doing it for generations. It just wasn't 2020. It's 1960. It's a perfect example, 60 years ago. And then they had to delete him when he wouldn't do exactly their bidding. And they frankly were probably over with him. They didn't need him anymore. So that's the next part of this point. And we move out from 71 to the next bankruptcy point, which is 99. So we're going to talk a little bit about 99 to 2001. So let me kind of erase this up here because we're kind of messing up with this screen. Okay, so 99 to around 2001, we have the next bankruptcy crisis point. One of the things that happened is Russell J. Gould looked at the system and he found that we were in a bankruptcy right away here. And so he went in and actually founded the quantum language that we are talking about with the quantum financial system. So in the quantum language, he started understanding that when they capitalize your name, okay, when you see Scott capitalized, that's how they're showing you as a dead vessel. And they do a whole bunch of things with birth certificates and other kind of things. I don't want to get off into that kind of track. So what they're using you as a dead vessel so that they could trade you in the stock market. Well, Russell J. Gould actually understood this. So he became Postmaster General of the Philadelphia Bank in 1999. And he took over the flag and all the whole process with this. This is the beginning because he saw a bankruptcy sitting out there. Oh, it pissed off Bill Clinton. Not like you cannot believe. Now, in and around 9 of 2000, so Clinton's at the end of his 8-year term, he was told and held at gunpoint by the White Hat military that we needed to move into a gold-backed currency. So here's what they did. They set up a system, and that's why you have to understand Bush and Gore were fighting each other. When you saw those little hanging chads kind of stuff, it was just another, that was a systemic approach to how they were going to manipulate the future elections. So now we see a systemic approach in this process. So now we have Bush in line in here. So one of the things that happens is they put the gold and the computer system in World Trade Center, 1 and 2. So they have the gold and the computer system set us up into that. World Trade Center 7 is an even more fascinating. So you'll see on the screen here, but let me tell you about World Trade Center 7, then we'll go backward over some of the things that you look at. Now it's hard to see that, some of the stuff on the screen, but I'll give you an idea. In World Trade Center 7 was all the documentation about the CIA and JFK. They really needed to get that documentation. This is the evidence against them. So we have the gold and the computer system, and we have the evidence over here. Now, what you don't really understand is Larry Silverstein, only 2 months, 3 months maybe before 9/11, goes off and revalues the building at, I think it was like $3 billion. And he put an extra rider against terrorism. Now, if you go and watch videos, it's the BBC, and over the woman's left shoulder, World Trade Center 7 is still standing, and she's talking about she goes, they say, well, what's happening? Well, World Trade Center 7 is down. It hadn't been down yet. Messing with their narrative. See, the reality messes with your narrative. And so here's what happened. World Trade Center 7, he actually, and they talked to, on PBS, they talked to Larry Silverstein. He said it had to be pulled. Now, what do you say by pulled? The Seattle Kingdom, years and years before, just came down as this gorgeous, just comes down like this. World Trade Center 7 comes down in 7 seconds. 9/11 truthers go through this thing with structural engineers and architects and people who know better. There's been no fire in the history of the world that can take down a building. And yet both buildings come down and all the little materials out there. Here's the thing, if you look over the left side of the screen over here, magical proof appearing of passports. Now, if the fire is so big it's going to take out the buildings, how come passports magically show up around you? There's no way that they can do that. And if you look down on the left side of the screen too again, and it says magically diagonally cut support beams. Like, guess what? It would come down in a whole structure point. They were actually cut. So there was a very powerful set of things that they did. They have a thermite that they had set up to take out the building. And secondly, there was some real great evidence about a DEW, a directed energy weapon, that might have come down because there were cars that were burning in some places and other cars that were perfectly placed just had ash on them. These criminals are the big issue. Do you know that Rumsfeld in the Pentagon takes out one day earlier, has $2.3 trillion that they can't find in the kitty? They're looking around, they can't find it. And no one ever asks them to explain it. It's how they steal this whole system. It's been trying to come on for a very long time frame. The reality that you have to see is 2001, guess what we're going to come up to? When we move over here, we have to have another bankruptcy period of time, and we call it 2020. Now, it's taking all the way a few years. By the way, remember we said this, it takes a couple years to get this thing done when they finalize it. That's why we either have the system of the Great Reset, which is already dead. I know you don't believe that right now if you're listening to this, or you have NESARA. There's only one of two possibilities out there. There's no in between of this. It's known about. The death cycles come every 20, 30 years. And it's there. It's in the ethosphere in essence. Don't believe it any other way. And our next screen. I mean, we could talk about that for like hours and hours and hours. There's many better people that talk about the evidences of 9/11 than I do. People ask me to like kind of do that. I mean, because I know about it doesn't mean I'm the perfect person for that. There are people who are way smarter than me on that kind of stuff and follow it all the way through. Okay, the value of money in the both systems. So when we think about value, how does this work? Value in the system of the fiat is based upon confidence. When the confidence in the dollar is high, or the confidence is high in the economic systems, boy, everything works really well. And by the way, under Trump and under Reagan, those are two time frames where confidence was relatively high. By the way, when was it low? It was pretty low in Clinton's time frame. It was kind of low in Bush Sr. It was really low in Bush Jr., and Obama got and made it even lower than that because they were stealing from the system coming to the end. And Trump knew about it. But he increased the value of that currency point, so we saw some economic upticks, right? But again, it's all based upon confidence. Man, if you had confidence in me, see, this is how people do this. I mean, it's a fragile thing. If you had confidence in me, I know he's going to tell the truth. That guy's good at telling the truth, and I tell a whole bunch of lies, and you'd be like, I have no confidence in him. Oh, we can't have our currency built upon this. And yet that's exactly what we do. This system allows compound interest to be charged. Now, if you've watched my last video, 14th Amendment under the 4th section, and it says that when insurrection is practiced by the people of the government, you are not to incur the debts that come from that. And how do we say insurrection? Here's what they knew. They knew that the central banks would go and have people like the Rothschilds and the idiots that are globalists in their nature. And they wanted to see that system come into vogue. And we have the Queen as well. So when you have Rothschilds that are from England and from the European kind of idea, and they're influencing our financial system, that's opposite of the 1870s concept of the 14th Amendment in the fourth section. And yet, they've been doing it right underneath our noses because they changed the Constitution in that way. It creates an inverse relationship with price. So every time the confidence goes down, the price increases. And we will talk about that really, really closely here in just a minute. So again, when value of the money is low, it increases the needs for payment. So every time we see lower and lower confidence in the dollar, and we see higher and higher increases, couldn't catch that. When we see higher and higher increases in that point, here's what we find. Instead of having to pay for it outright, we come up with a new concept called payments. Let me kind of explain how payments actually sets up for you. So let's just come up with a fictional car, okay? And you say, I need a new car and my budget is $300 a month, okay? Because that's what you're talking about, your payments. Most people walk in, like 95% of the people walk in with payment kind of things. So the little sales guy comes up and he goes, oh, well, we can get you in that, your favorite thing, favorite car, for $350 a month. You're like, what? I can't do that. So he comes back to you, goes, well, then what could you do? He comes back and he says, what is your potential? What's the top you could come up with? You see, you walked in with a $300. You said, well, I could probably do, $320. Now you just raised your number. They got a lot of room to do this. See, not just 5-year notes, but 6-year notes and 7-year notes and whatever they want to do, okay? Changing the interest rates and all this other stuff. Then they come back to you with your favorite car and they say $327 a month. And you're going, making diamonds, and you finally come up with, fine, I can do that, because you're going to move them around a little bit of money, and you figure out a way that you can finally do that and walk out a little bit happy because you got the product, and you forget about the payments until it really starts coming due. This is how they do this, and how they manipulate it so they can actually rise the price farther and farther and farther. Okay? Now, when we move into an asset-backed economy, the value of the money is increased. One of the things that you'll start seeing happening, so we'll erase the screen here, is first off, people have gold right now. And I have some gold as well. And when we have a gold-backed economy, here's one of the things that happens. Right now, gold's sitting around $2,000 an ounce, okay? Make up a number. Now, there's actually, in my book called Revelations of the Red Pill, there's a woman, and I'm blanking her name out. It's a really hard name. She's passed away. In 1995, she predicted when gold was $368 an ounce, she predicted if you don't let the Fed and you don't let the government play a part in it, she predicted a number like this. She said it could go up to $5,000 an ounce or more. That is a profit like nobody's been. Actually, she said $2,000 to $5,000 at the time when it's $368. Like, holy cow. That's when I sat and I go, wait, I need to really read her article. And I kind of reference this in this book. But what if gold sits at around $5,000? Just say for the heck of it. Even if you don't like my number, just stick with me for a second. So let's say they set it, and they have to set it. Who sets it? The Treasury Chairman. Do not believe it's Janet Yellen. She is a capitalist. She's a globalist sicko. She's done, okay? It's Steve Mnuchin. Do you know that Steve Mnuchin made one of my favorite movies? Steve Mnuchin is the Treasury Chairman that made one of my favorite movies. Other movies, The Accountant. Oh, If you want to see a movie that will blow your mind and how they were looking at this, The Accountant is powerful, interesting stuff. And so Mnuchin will set a number, and he will set that puppy in stone. Now, can gold rise in value? Well, hard assets are always going to be higher and lower. But here's one of the things that happens. Let's say you had $2,000 a share and you bought, I'm making up a number, 10,000. So you bought, that's a lot of money. So you spent $200,000 in gold. Okay, so you have $200,000 in gold. Now, if you came out, did I do that number right? I'm sorry. Get my point here. So let's change that a little bit here. So let's just say it's 1,000 ounces of gold, and so you would say you have 2 million. Sorry, I was doing math on the fly. Sorry, forgive me. Okay, so anyway, we have 1,000 shares. We bought 1,000 shares. We got it at $2,000. Now, you bought $2 million of gold, and then it moves up to $5,000, and you want to be able to cash out of that amount. And you probably will, because you'll see the stabilization. So it'll, do this, okay? It'll go up, but it's not gonna go up the rocketing pace that it will here in just a little bit. When it sets, you're going to want to turn in that gold at $5,000 a share, just say. And you're going to want to make the money. That's really kind of cool because the IRS is already out of the way, because they're also, in the 16th Amendment, it was ugly and wrong, okay? They cannot take your money, and this is something that's a dead part of the old system, okay? So here's one of the things that you'll do. You'll sell your gold back to the Treasury, which will increase the economy. It's a good thing. Doesn't mean you can keep all you want to. I don't care. If you had 1,000 ounces and you wanted to keep it down to 10 ounces, whatever. Keep it all if you want to, but you're probably going to want to turn it in because you want to make that extra money. I know of a guy named Daniel that does this all the time. So you're going to see, a fluctuation and increase. The people will give their gold back because they want to make some of their money, but they want to keep some of it on hand. It's never a bad value. I also believe that we're going to move into, instead of this, gross amortization structure, you're going to see more of a fee-based structure to loans. Because, by the way, you have to have a loan, okay? We're not going to get away from loans because we can't afford to jump out and write a $200,000 check on things, okay? Anyone who says oppositely hasn't really looked at the economic system. How do we know that? The PPP loans actually created that. Do you know that when I got my PPP to pay my employees, the banks got a fee from guess who? The Treasury. Because the Fed was put underneath the Treasury. They've already been dead since March of 2020. And when they go through bankruptcy and we flip over into gold currency, we won't feel it. We'll just notice that our debts are gone because they were part of the old six system, okay? It will not be as easily to manipulate the gold, because here's one of the things I want you to catch is your relationship is going to change. When you see the gross things that Walmart has done, when you see the gross things that tons of these big businesses and banks have done to you, do you think your confidence is going to be high or low? Right? I mean, it's going to go down so low. And how do you fix, this vote of no confidence kind of thing? How do you fix that? You're going to have to build relationships. Now, here's one of the things that's going to happen. When you think about you're giving over your valuable money for something, the only way that you can really fix that is have that relationship. Hey, listen, Steve has a guy that comes in and he fixes all of our appliances. He's done it at the house and at the office. Steve's a great guy. And by the way, this refrigerator out here is like 17 years old, okay? And it keeps like going, chipping out the ice, and we have to it goes off all the time. And I'm like, dude, if we need to buy a new refrigerator, just tell me. And he's like, no, $170 and gets it all fixed. It has to do a whole bunch of work on it. It's part of the process that happens with that. Because I trust him, I'm going to pay what he's going to ask me to pay. Not a problem at all. And I think that relationship has to come back. But those people who have lost your confidence, like in the banking system, they're going to have to pay for it through the teeth. And they're going to have to be and the only way you fix that is by transparency. And so when the value of the currency is high, a decreasing need for those high prices and less credit. So you're going to start seeing this flipping. So again, when the value of the money is incredibly high, price has to have an absolute decrease. Now, one of the things you can piss me off, I'm just telling you the truth, is when you say things like 1950s pricing. I had a guy that was throwing out something to me the other day, and he was like, well, I want President Trump to bring back, require 1950s pricing. I said, do you want a dictator? Trump he's an economist. He's a smart guy. He's not going to mess with that system. Who sets pricing? The system. The market. We call it the market sets the price. It's what you want to pay for that and what they can think that they can do for that. So there's always a give and take. It's always a fight a little bit. It's never a perfect system. And when I say this concept of price, and I want to answer this one question that keeps coming out, 1960s pricing, 1950s pricing. See, that's a horrible, horrible analogy. Here's what I want you to think about. My dad had a 1966 Ford Bronco. That sucker had a 4-shift, right, a 4-gear kind of thing. He had it geared really down low so we could go up in the mountains. I mean, the thing could go, if it hit 55 miles an hour, it was like, the RPM was just freaking out, right? And the dashboard was really simple. AM radio, that's all you had, right? Compare that to a new Bronco, and I'm going to make up a number, okay? The technologies within it is 30. You just think of the technologies. What? 130 technologies, 1,000 pieces of technology in it. So if there's 1,000 pieces of technology, or even 130 versus the 30 technology pieces in the Bronco, how could a new Bronco beat the price of a 1966 Bronco? Okay, stop. Let's move on to this relationship kind of conversation. So the fiat currencies, in the fiat currency, they control the cards. They control everything, right? And they have these long contracts. When you see the contracts for mortgage companies, it's like page after page after page. I remember I had an old stamp of my signature. And I'm just joking. I mean, I had it in there, and I had it in my briefcase, and I'd taken this appointment, to get a new house or something like that. And I pull it out. I said, can I just stamp my name? She was like, I just flipped her off. I'm like, would you calm down? I was joking, okay? The reality is when they make those contracts, you have to understand it's only for their benefit. It's never for your benefit in that way. The banks create massive institutions. I mean, when you see most of these banks, you drive by a bank and there's a massive amount of land and there's 10,000 square feet for the bank. And you see all these glass offices, right? And they're all, they always want to do money offices with glass. So we're transparent, right? And there's 3 tellers up there sitting on their cell phone messing around, and one customer walks in and maybe another customer's in and there's not much stuff happening at most banks. Maybe there's 3 or 4 people. Oh my God, if there's 4 people in the bank and there's a line of cars in the back, oh my gosh, rush hour kind of thing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The systems, why do they have the money for it? Why are the biggest buildings bank buildings with that? It's going to change. The banks decrease your education with need for wealth advisors. Now, I'm not trying to beat up wealth advisors, but the reality is, you need to learn about your money. They love that confusion. Go, let me figure it out for you, Scott. You don't have to think about it. But when we move into an asset-backed economy, here's the thing. Banks become agents, okay? They're through ports. This is what I believe what we're going to start seeing more and more. Banks will have to be much more transparent, not just the glass. They're going to have to be fully transparent. They're going to have to compete on local levels. This is why I'm telling you all the time. Find a local bank, check them out, and go and move your money to local banks. Do not get it. Stay away from the big old nasties, okay? They're done. SEC is it. Okay, the very first thing when you go to the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, okay, so it's talking about banking. The very first thing they say is, banking, they're the most righteous company you can ever deal with, in essence. That's what they said. It's like the mafia, or the CIA, or excuse me, FBI talking about the mafia going, we love them. They're number one. Yeah, right. The lack of trust will change that relationship, and there's a massive need for education. This is one of the things that a calling on my life that we're going to see. And you're going to see people like this. And there's a guy named Big Daddy Kahuna, great YouTube channel and Telegram channel. Daniel with Silence Do Good, MBA. There's several of these people, really smart kind of people. And we're going to need them. I have a guy that comes on my channel named Jeremy Whaley, jeremywhaley.com. And these are money people that are going to teach you about the whole system. Now, I want to teach you more about the overall global things, that getting into the granular level of that stuff. You're going to need those people to help you with that. Okay? So let's look at our next screen right here. And I just want you to see on one side of this the value points that kind of come out here. Okay. So when we're in the value system of the fiat money, which is the red line there, when the low value of money, so we have a low value up top, which is how the fiat currency has gone, the prices increase dramatically. So when we have a low value, we'll have a high price. And by the way, you're feeling this high price right now. You see consumer goods are inching up there, and yet some of the other consumable goods like foods are just going crazy, and gas is crazy, high price kind of thing. And it gets to the point where it becomes unaffordable. What they will do is that they will do things like payment plans, okay? And they will find a way. You'll hear payment plans, and actually the Canadian government wanted to put this one out there. They're like, oh, we'll help you by have government subsidies. See, that's another type of level. So when they say subsidies, you got to go, huh, so you're subsidizing it. So in essence, I'm really paying for it anyway. Okay? Then it becomes, and you have an increasing price that has no internal value. So for instance, let me talk to you about like health insurances. Insurances are one of the most manipulated things out there. I had a friend of mine, and he was talking about in the 80s, he used to do health insurance specifically. And he was talking about it. He said then after a while, there were like layers of 7 or 8 people on top of him that was taking the money away from the person. And they were doing this on a consistent level. And it was really making him crazy until he couldn't make any money. Now I'm going to tell you some fascinating points here, okay? Because this is how sick the health insurance points are. Most of these health insurance have billion, with a B, profit quarters. We're not talking about year, profit quarters on top of this. And they tell you that the problem is the greedy doctors. What they're talking about is the doctors or the providers, okay? So this is the problem in the system. It's not us, it's them. And very, very common, okay? So let me tell you how, but I want to show you something that will be fascinating. of all the dollars that you spend upon the insurance agency, what a number comes down to them is 9% of every dollar you spend in. The greedy doctors only get 9%. Yes. Who's the problem? The billion-dollar insurance companies. And this is where I would say to you this. You are going to see a massive reduction in no-value types of ideas out there. Now, when they start getting really bad, and you're seeing this right now, home values get increased dramatically as well. So we start to see home values, and then it raises and then it gets to the ones that have cost of goods sold. So everything else, now everything else gets to that point, and it becomes unsustainable. Now, when we move into the next phase of this, and that's the green side there, okay? What will happen is this, and it's a steady climb, or steady decline, excuse me. So when money is very valuable, one of the things that will happen is you'll start to see a decreasing price because competition shows up. Why? It's because the big businesses have reduced the confidence in the people. And you're going to see this in a very powerful way when you realize how sick these idiots are. So the small businesses who have always been used to competition won't have a problem with it. And they're going to start competing for your situation, which will show, and that will be the first initial point of decrease. Then you'll see a big decrease when things like the things that have the no value points come in. So like the health insurances. See, this is where we're going to start seeing the, insurances. When the When the health insurances start showing up in the system, you'll start saying, they will mandate those guys come down. So you might see these things go in half or better in that pricing kind of thing. Now, I want to kind of push off on something that will be very, very, I don't know how to say this, but it'll be controversial, okay? But I want to share with you one of the things that I think will happen is the house. Now, I'm just going to make up a number here, okay? Just stick with me for a second. And let's just say your house is valued at $300,000 and you've just, refinanced it just a little bit ago, okay? So let's say you have no principal and mortgage insurance, which means you put down 20%. So 20% of that is $60,000, or you're financing $240,000, okay? So let's just say your payment is, I don't know, like $1,400 a month. I'm just guessing on a number here, okay? Now, how much equity do you have in the house right now? Even if you pay for it a couple years later, you're still only going to have about 60,000, maybe 61. Oh my gosh. In 1 year, you might have paid $1,000 to your principal, okay? So here's one of the things that's going to happen. This is a debt. And when you see the debt structure happen, the price, you have now almost instantaneously $300,000 of value. Now, one of the things that happens, we have known for a very long time, these things are manipulated. So manipulated kinds of pricing, maybe let's just say that thing goes down to $200,000. Now, I have a friend of mine who he and I have gotten into some good conversations. By the way, iron sharpens the iron. And Jeremy and I get into one on this issue, and that's okay, okay? It's not bad to have disagreements. You don't have to agree with things. We can always say agree to disagree. Just like you have a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and Denver Bronco fan. They're not going to agree on things all the time. It's okay. Be calm about it, okay? But here's the thing. Was his value of the house really, or his abilities, or the asset, $300,000? No, he only had $60,000 in assets. If you kill off his payment and what he has out there, he now has, and if the price goes down to $200,000, which is much more affordable in that market, how much asset does he have? He's moved his assets from $60,000 to $200,000. He's increased his asset point. So don't tell me that the housing price actually hurts you. It doesn't hurt you if you've taken away the price, or excuse me, the asset amount that you have available to you. You have $60,000 assets available. If you sold it next day, I mean, you bought it and then sold it, a month later, whatever, and you sold it for $300,000, you still have $60,000 you had out of it, okay? But in the essence, even if you have a decrease in the price, you're going to still have $200,000 because it's all yours. Now, the other things that will change as we go along are cost of goods sold. So that takes a little bit longer with this, okay? So I'm just going to come up with a price of something, and let's just make up some numbers. Let's just say you have a Bluetooth type of device, and it's $100 retail value. The cost of goods sold cost that dude $50 to buy it, okay? So again, his profit margin is $50. You understand that, okay? So this is what he's got to do, and he has to have a certain amount that's sold every single month for him to be able to make money. You want him to stay in business, okay? Now, how does it work when we start to see the value of the money increasing? So how does he have to do this? Now, first off, he's going to look at competition. So as competition comes in, he might have to decrease the price here a little bit. And maybe he can decrease the price to $90 by competition. But it's eating into his cost of goods sold. Now, hopefully, he can still keep in the market with this. But it takes time for his manufacturers to reduce the price. What will happen to him over time, and let's just say that they drop the price down to $30 cost of good. Now he has a $60 margin, but competition's going to keep growing with him, and he needs to kind of create more value. And so one of the things, if he's just a price competitor, if he's just looking at price competition, maybe he drops the price to $55. I'm making up a number. So he's getting $25 now. Now, here's what he's got to be careful of. This is why you need to be calm when it comes to pricing. I know you're just looking at this number right here, okay? But everyone else has to look at what they can actually make. And now, if he's only making $25 per, can he afford to sell enough of those? So if the costs, if the expenses go down because he doesn't have to pay for the building anymore, because he owns it, let's say, he's got enough customers in the door, on and on and on. Can he make it on $25? Well, he may not. Okay, but it is a delicate dance when you talk about cost of goods, when you have some really hard profit points that are in there, or cost to expense points that are inside of this. So it's a real strong dance, and it'll take years for this thing to filter out, because it takes time for them to make something better. So he might be able to do it at 55, or might even sell it, and I'll just kind of present this one. What if he sells it at $65 instead of $55? And he's making $35 per one, but this is a much, much higher value item because it does 2 times the amount than the $100 feature. And you're going to get $65, but it's going to be 2 times better than this one was. Well, that's worth it. And if it's worth it for him to do it, and he can still make good money at 35, then he's got to be able to say, well, I'm going to try to do that. Okay? Let's move to our next slide. Now, when we deal with this issue, this is interesting. Some extras in there. Social Security and disability payments. Say there are people who can't work anymore because they have a disability, or you're someone, my father-in-law is 89, he'll be 89 this year, wow. My dad is 84, come on. You know, they're not going to be a productive member, working member of society. But if you have Social Security at these disgusting rates that they have right now, and most people, by the way, who try to get on disability, they get denied their first time, and then they just leave and go away, like, okay, I'll just live without it. No, I mean, this is just sad and sick in the system. So that we believe that will probably rise up. Don't ask me what it is. I don't know the numbers. No one knows that exactly right now. Here's the other thing that will happen too. Your savings will actually increase because the value of things, of the money, will increase. You'll see that savings rise as well, which means that instead of these disgusting 0.25, rates, you'll see things like 4% on your money. Like what? And so every dollar you have in there is really making the money because that's the value inside of the banking system. And I think that other things will change as we go along here. So I want you to think about this. We're just talking about marketing. Now, good companies, sorry, my nose is kind of messing up here. Ugh, my sinuses. Good marketing changes when we have a fiat currency to a value-based currency. In a fiat currency, there's a lot of fluffy stuff. When you see ads for marketing kind of things, and it's low education, so they want to do fluffy things like buy one, get one free. And they're looking for draws, like all these stupid draws. And that stuff, I believe, you're gonna see it go down. They're looking at monthly payments. I'm going to tell you, I think that we're going to see something really interesting that comes over here. When the money is valuable, I believe that you're going to see more relationship happen. I believe that you're going to see a lot more transparency. That's because the education of the consumer is increasing dramatically. So not only are you going to see the value of the product increasing with real abilities, and there's tons of technologies that have been co-opted by the cabal. So when we start utilizing those products, values, even if you had a product that used to cost you, like we're saying it before, let's just say it was $100 and it only decreased to $80. Let's make up another number. But it decreased in value by competition and the value of the money, but you have way more value in the product. But what about a relationship and the transparency that might come? What if they give you extra services that are just bar none? So they actually add on services up one side, down the other. Do you see the pattern over on this side versus the fluffy patterns over here? And if you look at Super Bowl ads and all these other idiot ads, when you see like Doritos commercials, you're like, what are you selling me? Are you selling me a sexy woman? Or are you selling me the tasty Dorito? Right? It's fluffy. It's look over here. It's false flag kind of ideas. you'll start seeing a real relationship difference here and transparency, because the education goes up and the value of the product. They're going to show you things. They're going to say, this is what we do. By the way, good businesses, good small businesses have actually gleaned this response that actually gets better. Do you know why I have a YouTube channel for my hearing solution centers? Do you know that why we have TikTok and other kinds of things? It's not to get you, oh, I need to have more and more customers. Of course, we need to have more and more patients coming in the door. But that's not the focus. We need to increase the education of our patients that come in the door. And when we have that increase of patients, they see the transparency and they have a trust relationship that is developed by the amount of information inside the YouTube channel. Do you understand why I'm doing this for you on my ministry channel, is talking about this? Because I'm trying to increase the value. I'm actually doing all of this stuff, okay? That when you look at this and go, hey man, this is great. And you're going to see this on ministry levels. I've seen ministries who like beg for money every time you turn around, and they try to throw you, buy this $30 thing and buy this $80 and you give $100. And yet you see other ministries like Andrew Womack Ministries. And for years we were watching him, and you could download some of the product kind of things, and you got all this kind of stuff. And after a little bit, we're like, wait a second, he's never asked for a dime. And you kind of look at it and you go, wait. And I went out to one of his sessions in Colorado, this gorgeous area in Woodland Park. I used to grow up in Colorado, but I had never been to this part of Woodland Park. I mean, unbelievable scenes out there. And I just like, I need to give. And we started giving monthly, first $50 and then $100 a month. And it was another point of my tithe issues, okay? And we decided he was feeding into our life. We needed to feed into him. And so the value was increased because he'd already been doing this inside of my life. And I've been trying to do that as a business owner. And you're going to start seeing this is who you're going to gravitate to. And the people that are still doing the fluffy BOGO type of silliness, you're going to say, I don't want anything to do with you because you're part of the old system. Now, we're going to move over to this one here. And my last little slide here, I want you to focus on the brown one, okay? Don't worry about the other ones here. What about the 1,000-year reign some NESARA people are talking about? Okay. Now, I want to do a last little section on this kind of area here, and I want to answer some of these basic questions that are out there. So some people are saying, well, we're going to go into a peaceful time frame, and even including a lady named Melissa Redpill. I really like her, but I wish she would stick with the Bible, okay? And she preaches the Bible. Okay, let me just explain what happens, okay? There is a 7-year reign period, okay? Jesus, and we've talked about this before, introduces the Antichrist, a guy, okay? When we get in a little bit later, we get into the mark of the beast, which happens approximately in the middle part of the section. But here's the point you have to catch. There are 650 scriptures that intimate a end time period that has to come. And if God is the personal guarantor of the word, why do I say that? Because here's what happens in John 1, he equates the Father, Jesus, the Word, and truth, and he puts them all together. And he goes, and basically the Word dwelt and lived among us. And that's when he was saying that to you, he's going, this is really important to me. Matthew 24:35, heaven and earth will pass away. Earth will pass away a bit, okay? But my word will never pass away. And here's what happens. There is a 1,000-year reign at the end of the time frame that has to come. There's 333 verses around that one. So you're talking about in the range of 1,000 verses of Scripture. And if all Scripture is God-breathed, approved for teaching and reproof, how do you skip over the end time verses? So what the heck is NESARA about? NESARA is something that is going to, and we've already kind of proved those scriptures, the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. We're going to start seeing the bride, Jesus bringing in more of the bride of Christ because he is jealous to bring people in. Next, the black little section up on the right-hand corner. Are we in the end times? If we don't have the Antichrist, which is a guy, by the way, you have to follow what the word says. Okay, if Jesus was pictured in around 620 to 50 different scriptures. I think it's 620 different scriptures that talk about Jesus, and he fulfilled them perfectly. The Word of God says that Antichrist is a dude, and he has to be a dude. He can't be, it's not a system. See, the system is the mark, but it's mark of the beast. Beast is not a system. When you hear people talking about the beast system, that's just completely wrong. So here's what happens. If we're not here, and I would say to you this way, if you think Joe Biden's the Antichrist, then he can't even put on a diaper, okay? So that's not true. So are we in the end times? Heck no. When will Jesus come back? Well, how long does NESARA go? I don't know. 3 to 5 years? 3 to 5 months? I don't care. Do you know why I don't care? Because God didn't tell me. He didn't go, oh, Scott, we got to tell Scott. Man, if we don't tell Scott, he's going to be really mad. They're like, if you're not hearing the answer, it's not for you to know. Don't worry about it. How long will it take before Jesus comes back? Well, some time frame, okay? I don't know, and I'm not worried about it because he didn't answer that question for me. And lastly, on the right-hand column, is NESARA just the other side of the Great Reset? Now, I hear this so many times, and you have to catch this point. So I'm going to kind of draw this out, and I've said this about three or four times already, but I'm going to put out this kind of thing. NESARA, Great Reset. Okay, so here's what you're seeing. You're talking about white hats over here. Talking about it. Truthers. Not all of them, I understand truthers are talking about it. It is a gold-backed currency for every single nation, their own currency. Russia has its own currency separate. You're talking about people who get into this are talking about constitutional republic. They're talking about freedom. You have to fix the legal system. Debt, jubilee. Fiat currency, dead. Holding people to justice of the cabal kind of thing. This is what they talk about, okay? Let's just step over to the other side and you can answer your own question. Who talks about this? Klaus Schwab. Did I tell you about him? Did we talk about him? I think we did. He's walked around, there's a picture of him on the beach and he's wearing this gross, you would put him in jail if you really saw him, okay? World Economic Forum, the Fed, the media. We ain't got a good group of people, do we? Government officials, Hollywood. And what they want to do is you will own nothing and you'll love it. And we'll have a lot more communism. Now, how do I say this? Here's what we're hearing from idiots like AOC. She's talking about democratic socialism. Huh. Let's just pick it up here. White hats. Truthers talk about this. Goldbacked currency, nation for each nation, constitutional republic, a freedom, fixing the legal system, debt jubilee, fiat. If the fiat is dead, there's a justice system. Over here, we got Klaus Schwab, the gross person. We have the World Economic Forum, the Fed, the media, government, and Hollywood officials. These people are Satanists. And they don't mind you knowing that kind of issue. And they'll say you'll own nothing, but you'll love it. And it's a communism point, because even AOC talks about democratic socialism. You can only get yourself into socialism once. You can't get out of it. Okay? And they're talking about this kind of system. So you've got two competing issues. Is it two sides of the coin? Those are two opposite coins. We're not talking about the same coin. We're not talking about heads versus tails. Those aren't even close to one another. People want to say to me all the time, and I hear this so much of the time, that, you know, this is like good versus evil or God versus Satan. Can I just tell you something? And I've seen a meme where, you know, God's standing there, basically Jesus and Satan are arm wrestling. Okay, can I just tell you the reality of what happens in Scripture? When Jesus steps back on the planet right after the great day of the wrath of the Lamb and we're into the millennial reign, do you know who he tells to take up? Well, I'm going to use this side of the screen, so we're going to delete that on this side of the screen. I just want you to see this, okay? So Jesus shows up on the planet. In front of him is the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan. Okay? He's got three separate, strong personality points, okay? The false prophet, jeez. So the false prophet, all these idiots are, and you know, this guy's got the first beast in him, he's got the second beast in him, and Satan is just disgusting. So you got basically 7 basic personalities when you kind of look at it a little bit closer. And instead of Jesus taking it, guess who he sends? He sends Michael, the archangel, to go send them all to the abyss. Huh. He doesn't even go ahead, I don't have to do that. I'm just going to have you take all these dudes, box them up, throw them into the abyss. Do you think that Jesus is really the opposite of Satan? See, that's what Satan wants you to know. How does Jesus actually do this system? He just walks over because they have tried to institute the mark of the beast, which is the type of the vaccine. He's tried to institute the mark of the beast. By the way, God just said, no. And when God says no, it doesn't matter. There's nothing that they can do about it. It's just a big old nasty no. And he is going to fulfill Scripture in all of these ways. And we've already shown you those scriptures of Proverbs 13:22, or Psalms 13:22, Proverbs 27:17. We have Psalms 91:8. We have James 5:3 through 5 or 6. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on, all these different scriptures. There's one in Leviticus as well. I mean, they're there. Or excuse me, Deuteronomy. They're all there. This thing is going to happen, and it is going to be good for you, but you have to educate yourself, because your problem right now is what everyone's struggling with. They don't know what's happening. So you'll have to educate yourself, and this is the start of the process. And after the red pill, you're going to see all this stuff kind of come out. And I'm just trying to help you with that too. So look at the YouTube channel, go on. You can kind of go on to my website, Dr. Scott Young, and kind of get Revelations of the Red Pill if you want to. You don't have to. I'm trying to make it straightforward and easy for you. Okay? Thanks so much.